Hello and welcome to another instalment of our occasional podcast called I Wish I Hadn't. I'm Dave Hill.
And I'm John Wyatt. As you can tell from our names, David and Jonathan, we were born in the 1950s, so we've had many years to accumulate embarrassing moments which we now feel happy to share.
The dictionary defines regret as a sorrowful remembrance, a sense of loss. But we're not in the business of sorrow and loss here. We're dealing with those things in life that we might wish had been otherwise, but which we're now prepared to own up to.
To recall those ill-advised purchases, the awkward social gaffes, the mechanical mayhem and painful misadventures scattered liberally throughout our lives. Okay, so today we attempt to mute some of those hideous noises we've been subjected to in our past.
Indeed.
It's today the subject or the topic is aural, spelt with an AU at the beginning, not an O. Because
led to some hilarity when we were discussing it. I seem to recall that we were going to start with aural, which is probably a good place to start.
Through our ears. And of course, I mean, you know, we are both big music fans, Dave.
Absolutely.
But one of the things that I think, things that I wish I had never heard was the sound of my dog, my first dog, having his anal glands expressed. Because he was a very smelly dog. And I took him to the vet. And so he was put on a table and I stood at his head end and the vet went round to his rear end and the dog was sort of looking over his shoulder suspiciously. And the vet put on some gloves, lifted his tail and the dog's eyes started to bulge. And then as the finger went in, the poor animal let out this hideous scream. It was, you know, as if he was just being killed rather than... And I wish I could expunge that from my memory.
From your memory.
But of course, it made him a lot more pleasant to live with after that. So.
Well, yes, I can imagine. I mean, I think it's interesting that you sort of went straight for something like that because when we thought about things that we'd heard, my immediate thoughts went to different recordings that I purchased in the past and regretted tremendously afterwards.
Oh God, yes.
I think the thing is that, you know, when we were growing up, you didn't have the opportunity to listen to snatches of things that might and think, I'll listen to something on say Spotify or something and listen to various tracks and think, yes, that would be a good idea. You usually had to go on maybe one thing that you'd heard very briefly.
Yeah, and you bought the album and
absolutely. Yeah. Well, I mean, the one I always come back to is I heard on the radio. I think I heard a great track called "Dance with Me" by Orleans.
Oh yes,
very sort of West Coast Eagles type recording, and I thought that's really good. I must go out to Virgin Records and buy the album because it's obviously going to be fantastic. And I did, you know, my hard-earned cash went onto a copy of Orleans and I brought it home and put it on my stereo system. And I think the opening track was Dance With Me. Fantastic. Here we go. And
That's
then
right.
It was followed by a load of complete and utter toss, basically, which I played once and never listened to again.
While we're on the subject of this, Dave, could I just remind you about you buying the Steppenwolf album?
Oh, yes. The Steppenwolf album. Now, there was a great album.
The story of that one.
Steppenwolf Live. We were coming back from, I seem to recall, our hitching round Cornwall youth hostling trip, weren't we? And we were at Exeter bus station.
Yeah.
And we were going to Exeter bus station and there was a record shop. And I went in. We all went in and looked at various things. And I had some money left from our jaunt, and picked up this cover with a fantastic sort of, I think it was like a wolf's head on the front, if I remember right. Yeah, a very angry-looking wolf, and it had in great letters emblazoned across it, Steppenwolf Live. And I thought, great. I love Born to Be Wild. I like Pusher. I've heard all of those. hearing them live is going to be fantastic. So I duly parted with my money and purchased the album. And then we went home on the bus.
On the bus, in the rear of the bus, yeah.
The rear of the bus. Looked at the album cover a few times. Thought this is going to be great. There's some great tracks on here. Recognised most of these, and some new ones. Got it home and took the record out of the cover. Took it out of the sleeve, and there was the legend, Mrs. Mills' Party Time.
Oh dear, how we laughed!
Which
because getting to Exeter in those days wasn't that easy anyway, was it? Really? No doubt you had to persuade your dad to drive you down there, and
I did, yeah. And in fact, I wasn't able to take it back for quite some time because we weren't going to Exeter. I have to say, I did finally manage to go back with it and present it to, because surprisingly, the record inside that sleeve, the Mrs. Mills' Party Time, hadn't actually been played. I didn't actually put it on and play it to see if it was just a misprint. It was, in fact, that's it. There's no way. So,
did you actually put it on your deck and play it and think, well, actually, this isn't bad?
I'm in the mood for a party.
Exactly. Anybody who doesn't know Mrs. Mills, go and Spotify her now, because
absolutely, yeah.
Exactly what the difference is between Mrs. Mills and Steppenwolf. It's not the same thing. Yeah.
In fact, if I remember, many years later, wasn't it that our friends came and had managed to track down in a sort of a second-hand charity shop for about 50p a copy of Mrs. Mills' Party Time, which they then presented me with. They said they thought I must be missing it, But,
yeah. Oh well. Yeah. What a classic. Yeah. We enjoyed that one. I'm going to say one of the things I wish I hadn't done was waste a lot of time talking about music. Waste a lot of time in my life trying to appreciate classical music. I just don't get it. I've tried quite hard, and I sort of sit down, try and listen to it, and then I just get bored and wander off and do something else. So all those hours that I lost trying, thinking it was a bit Philistine of me not to appreciate classical music. So I spend some serious effort trying to, and I never will. That's beyond me.
I mean, it's interesting because we do share a lot of musical taste, but there is quite a lot of classical music I do like. I mean, in a way, I suppose it's the sort of the well-known bit, the bits you hear on adverts sometimes, and the bits you think, oh, I know this, and then I've heard various sort of bits of not whole classical pieces, but certain parts of it.
Okay. But generally speaking, I've always been a rock folk, much more contemporary, music with a beat, I suppose.
Yeah.
Can I just remind you of another experience that we shared, which I think we will probably both regret, which was sitting in a hall in Bridport, watching a concert and trying very hard to suppress laughter because one of the singers was singing so consistently out of tune, and it was actually quite painful trying to stop ourselves from laughing, and we didn't dare look at one another because it was you, me, and Jackie, I think.
Would this be the rendition of Bally High by any chance?
Certainly was in the lyric in Bridport.
Yeah. I remember it well because I can remember sitting there and the sort of the accompaniment started, and then suddenly this voice went Bally High, and it really was a case of we can't possibly catch each other's eye now because we would just burst out and cry with laughter.
Seemed to be appreciating it, but you and I had my head in my hand. I was holding my stomach because I was just trying to stop laughing out loud. It's so difficult if you try and suppress a laugh.
Yeah.
It was painful, wasn't it? Really?
Oh, it was horrendous. It really was. Yeah, and it was having been in various concerts with the music that I've taken part in. Whenever there's if there are shows, then usually the people who are reasonably accomplished can get the parts and do the songs. And when there's a concert, many societies attempt to encourage the ones who don't normally get parts
Oh,
by
yeah.
giving them a solo. And
Yeah.
the trouble is, by doing that, they often just prove why that person doesn't get a part normally. They
Mm.
audition for it, hopefully, and they're never going to get anything. So they're given a song in a concert, and some of the stuff that you hear, well, as we did there, is just phenomenally poor, and you know why they're not doing parts in shows.
Do they don't get the part presumably then, or you just
No,
sort
no,
of
no. They
let
don't
them?
normally. They're the people who have auditioned for parts and don't get them normally, and you know
Yeah,
why, because they can't do it basically,
yeah,
and you wouldn't possibly subject the normal audience to that sort of performance, shall we say.
yeah. I know, no, I know. And I've got another one, Dave, that actually
Mm,
involves you, and I think you might wish that you hadn't been involved in this one because
mm.
it takes us back to when we were about 12 years old,
Yeah.
13 years, and in assembly at school. And I, for some reason, had developed under my nose a very, very small wart, which I didn't think was visible to anybody, as you don't particularly, you know. And I came into assembly this day, and we stood together because you didn't sit in assembly, did you? We stood
Yeah.
together, and you looked at me because you know we just arrived at school, and you sang a short refrain from My Fair Lady. You sang, "I've grown accustomed to your warmth."
I'd completely forgotten that.
Well, I thought I'd just remind you because I was mortified. And I suppose I could say I wish I hadn't heard that. You probably wish you hadn't sung it. I mean, thinking back now,
I do now.
it was funny. And this walk just disappeared in time as they do. It was very small,
Yeah.
but you know, you know, the fact that you actually put it into song was kind of nice and touching. I thought.
When you
Um,
when you say it was quite small, John, it can't have been that small. My eyesight wasn't that good.
well, maybe just because we were standing close to one, we
Yeah.
were quite good friends. You probably had a fair bit of time to study my nose and my wart. But so there you go. You know, I just thought I'd remind you of that one.
Oh, I'm pleased to be reminded of that because it seems to it's completely slipped my mind.
Well, yeah, good. It's the best place for it to be.
Yeah.
But I've never forgotten it. You know, it's the trauma of that day that stayed with me all these years, and we're still friends. You know, it wasn't as
Yeah.
if I turned my back and stomped out of assembly. Never speak to me again. Never sing to me again.
Never sing to me again. Yeah, yeah, yeah. I I mean, I know this isn't completely to do with Aural. I suppose it is in a way, but talking of school assemblies, one of my enduring memories is of the only time I was ever sent out of assembly at school,
Oh yeah,
and we were standing together.
yeah.
You may or may not remember this, but I remember I was we noted because in those days the chair of governors used to come and sit on the stage with the head, from time to time, and would sit and sometimes would address the school about something or other. And I can't remember what it was, but we both noted that he'd obviously not checked carefully when he got dressed that morning because he had a very smart suit on, but completely
Mm.
odd coloured socks. Uh, in in the days before, that was a fashionable thing to do,
Yeah,
and
of
I, and
course.
I I pointed it out to you, and we laughed and we sniggered about it. I said, "Oh, look, he's got odd coloured socks on," and the head
Mm.
of girls' PE, no names, no patrol,
No,
spotted
I
it
remember her well.
and
Yes.
and came across and hoiked me out of assembly and told me to go out stand outside the door, which I did. Um,
Yeah.
I'd never been sent out before, and then of course you were there when assembly finished. You had to stand outside, and the 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 assembled staff, the teachers, would all one by one come out, and some would give people a telling off, or they would tut at them, or something
Mm.
that, to show their displeasure. And
Mm.
um, and as I stood there, I'd never been sent out before, and each teacher who came past me sort of stopped and said, "Are you feeling okay now, David?" And I said, uh,
Yeah.
yes, I am. Thank you very much. Oh, that's good to hear. And there must have been about 10 of them all did this as they went past. But the only
Mm.
one who didn't do it was the person who'd sent me out, who came and tore me off a strip for daring to talk in assembly. But I remember thinking, I got away with that, all right, because everyone thought I was ill.
It's interesting that you got blamed and I didn't. You know, you got hoiked out of assembly and I didn't. Maybe I
I,
just laughed in a quieter manner than
I
you.
think that would have been it, John. I think you would have hidden your laughter a little bit better than I did at the time.
Yeah. Yeah, well, thank goodness for that practice because when we were in the lyric that time, listening to Bally High, hiding our laughter was a good thing to do.
Oh dear, oh dear, oh dear. Yeah. I mean, yeah, just briefly going back to records, the only other one I ever recall buying as a huge disappointment was um, I'd bought the first Focus LP, which I thought was excellent and
Yeah.
played a lot. I didn't get the second one, but then the third one came out, Focus 3, which was a double album, in those days, double album. And
Mhm.
and again, I remember getting that home. This time the records were actually in the covers. It was the actual ones. And I put on side one, track one, and I played that. And I thought, as you do, hmm, not really sure. And then I played another track and thought, well, this isn't much better. And I got
Mm.
halfway through the third track on this first part of it, and lifted the needle off and didn't play the rest of it ever.
Right.
In
That
fact,
difficult third album syndrome.
I
Yeah.
indeed, in fact, I think I still have it, and it's probably as pristine as it was when I bought it because I remember
Mm.
thinking, basically, this is rubbish. So,
I'm sure we've all bought albums based on reviews.
yes, yeah,
You
yeah,
know, and you just play them and you think, where was this review coming from? I've got records in my past that I bought, because they were praised, and I just get them home and I think, no, definitely not. It's just, now we are so much better off, as you say, you can listen to them on Spotify and either think,
yeah.
yeah, meh, yeah, so yeah, we are luckier nowadays, but
Everyone, I mean, there was there was that thing of you sort of take various records into school to show that you had it and how cool you were and things like that. Um,
very much
and of
so, yeah.
course, someone actually said that I heard someone say the other day, these days, we've all got the same record collection because
Mm.
we can get them from any of the streaming sites, and so you don't have to purchase it. You don't even have to borrow it from someone. You can just play a bit of it and think, I like this. I'll hear the rest of it, or you can just switch to something
Mm.
else.
But I think
Um,
generally, I'd say I'd always had more hits than misses on things that I've bought.
Absolutely, yeah, yeah.
I've not had that many disastrous ones, which
No,
I've
no.
stuck to the back of the cupboard and never
Were you
played
ever
again.
dragged along to any concerts that you absolutely regretted going to see and thought, God, when is this going to finish?
Yes, I think that's quite interesting, isn't it? Really, because I mean, the most classic example of that was a friend who was trying to nail a girlfriend and accompanied her to a Christa Berg concert.
All right, okay.
Absolutely hated it, and it didn't work. Um, and really, it's rather like a story about you and your experience, in social embarrassment. He
Hmm.
actually went to another Christopher concert with her. And I still so going twice just compounds it. But
It does, yeah.
I used to go and see bands, with people I was in relationship with, and not, really, you were going along just to keep them happy.
Mm.
But
Mm.
the same thing works. You probably took, girlfriends along to concerts that you wanted to see, and they hated maybe.
Well,
Um,
yeah, I think that side of it is definitely true. I don't think I ever particularly went to any that I didn't like because I didn't go to that many really. I think a lot of the ones I went to in Birmingham, I I'd saved up a bit of money for. Couldn't afford to go to that many, and so was almost like determined to enjoy them. But I'm sure that many of the ones that I took girls along to, they weren't really what we used to think of as girls' music in those days, and it was a case of yeah, I'll come along, but and then of course you realise after about 3/4 of an hour when you're standing watching or listening to something, and you realise that the person you're with is is glancing at their watch
Yeah,
surreptitiously, wondering
yeah,
how much longer this is going to go on.
yeah. And do you remember in those days that you used to wake up the next morning and your ears would still be ringing? That was
Oh,
horrible. I
yes,
wish I
yeah.
had that experience numerous occasions. I mean, you said you didn't go to many concerts. I was looking back through some diaries recently. When I was in London as a student, I was going to see, bands often in pubs because it was the era of pub rock
Yeah.
3 times a week.
I think you were very lucky in that respect because of where you were. You could do that. Where I was,
Yeah,
it was very limited. I'd have to go certainly as when I was a student. I'd have to go on the bus or the train to Birmingham to see things, which I couldn't really afford to do very often.
no.
Whereas I mean, you had the tube and buses around to be able to just
I
get
was
get
always
to all those
getting
places
tickets to
easily.
things from Jackie. She'd say,
Mm.
here's a ticket for the Marquee tonight, or a
Yeah.
ticket for, the Rainbow or something or other, and you just go along, see somebody that you probably never even heard of before,
Mm.
and
Mm.
um, but yeah, so I guess we were lucky in that.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
you don't turn your nose up at a free, thing. But I mean, I can think of some terrible concerts I've seen too. Ones that I went to see David Bowie, and that was awful. Earl's Court.
Mm.
It was more entertaining looking at all the people dressed up like David Bowie than it
Yeah.
was because you couldn't hear the music at all. The sound system was appalling. Um, but yeah, and of course you and I have had the experience of going to see an artist who we won't name,
Mm.
which was probably amongst the very
Well,
best concerts we ever saw in our
yeah.
life,
Yeah.
and going to see him again, which was probably one of the
The
worst.
worst one, I'd put it up there as the worst. I think. I mean, I think it was
Yeah,
just
I think,
dreadful. Yeah, yeah, yeah,
yeah, big disappointment. But then, that's what you got with him. I mean, so sorry, Todd. But
yeah, yeah, yeah. I'm afraid it was appalling. Yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
So there's an awful lot of oral history to unpack in our past, isn't there? Because
Oh
we are
yeah,
both
yeah.
musos, and
Well, I mean, interestingly, you're saying that you didn't enjoy the David Bowie concert and the sound was awful. Whereas my experience of it when I went as a student and he came to Worcester where I was studying, it was fantastic. Really, really enjoyed it. But of course, it was a much smaller venue, um,
yes,
so the
yes, it was.
sound system would have been more uh, better for that area. And I thought it was
Yeah,
fantastic. I have to say, yeah.
yeah.
But
Well, else was just vast, and I mean, in those days, speaker systems just weren't up to it, really.
yeah, yeah,
Um,
no.
yeah. So if we open the door to the polite knock of the genie, Dave,
Yes,
and he
yeah.
comes in and says, David Hill, what do you want removed from your past to let your ears not suffer?
Yeah, yeah. Well, I mean,
What do you,
I can't say that things like the Mrs. Mills incident and Steppenwolf I'd want removed because they've given us hours of pleasure, really, to recounting it.
I could
Um,
laugh.
I think
Yeah.
I'd quite like, in a sort of if you like, a mercenary way. I'd quite like the genie to 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 take away the two records I mentioned that I'd bought and were awful, and
Mhm.
give me my money back in today's prices because that would be quite a nice little bonus, really. So
Yeah.
so Orleans and Focus Free, you can go. Thank you very much. Thanks to the genie, you can take them away.
I think for me, I would actually like all the hours back that I spent sitting down trying to listen to classical music and thinking I ought to be enjoying this, and
Yeah,
just own up to the fact that I wasn't enjoying it. I didn't really understand it. Let's just accept that there's some things in life that you are not going to like, and just accept it. So please, Jeannie, just give me those hours back.
excellent,
I could
excellent.
be listening to things I did like instead.
Yeah. So
Hmm.
I think we've covered quite a few areas of aural things there, oral, aural.
Yes,
And I think
always been a pleasure, Dave.
it's as always, and we'll reconvene again soon to go on to another something else that we wish we hadn't done, heard, said, whatever. Okay.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah.
Right.